The sun don't shine the same no more. My smile and what it was before. I hold out for a miracle. Hope for anything at all. My skin feels way too dry and sore. My eyes, they leak like rivers, oh. Without your touch, I'm less than low. I'll hold out for a miracle. Oh, if a miracle could bring you back home, I'd see you at my door, and I wouldn't let you go. Oh, but a miracle is not gonna be enough. It can't bear the lost love. I'd hold out for a miracle and burn. I pushed you hard, you pushed right back. I came and left the beaten track. You waited till the sun was black. You waited till your love went blank. Oh, if a miracle could bring you back home, I'd see you at my door, and I wouldn't let you go. Oh, but a miracle is not gonna be enough. It can't bear the lost love. I'd hold out for a miracle in vain. My heart is outside me. Died inside somehow. Oh, lost as I can see, an emptiness that's real. Oh, I'm pouring out the blues, pouring out the blues. Oh, till I'm so empty that I can't even fall. Oh, if a miracle bring you back home, I'd see you at my door. I wouldn't let you go. Oh, but a miracle is not gonna be enough. It can't bear the lost love. Hold up for a miracle and burn. Oh, 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 oh.
Thank you very much. The song you just listened to is an unreleased creation of Vladimir Popescu, who couldn't make it here today, and myself. And it thoroughly represents one of the most vulnerable moments of my life. I say moments because my life today has become entangled by consistent demand for vulnerability. And living such a life can very easily leave a man wondering, is vulnerability just another excuse for weakness? To clarify the term demand, no one actually asks me to be vulnerable. However, it takes a certain amount of weakness to speak so freely about your experiences on a daily basis, not only in words, but in musical notes. It's very, very important that you can share your perspective as an artist. As a matter of fact, Pharrell Williams once said that the way in which an artist expresses themselves is what is their art. And as a result, their role is to express themselves. And with every day I spend in the studio, creating music, creating melodic lines, writing lyrics, I tend to find that this statement of he is more true. Now, before I continue, I want to state categorically that being vulnerable is no excuse for weakness. As a matter of fact, it is a conscious choice that requires a lot of courage and reassures the individual of the normalcy in being feeble. Now, Let's think about it for a second. I define vulnerability as exposing yourself to physical or emotional danger. Now, if you asked yourself, would you want to intentionally expose yourself to emotional or physical danger? The answer obviously is no. However, when you're not choosing to be vulnerable, life finds its own way of putting you in places where you cannot do anything about where you are. You cannot influence the environment in any way. And in that moment, what do? My answer would have been to accept. Nonetheless, that vulnerability, those moments require great courage to go through. Some of the best examples that we know of today, some of the success stories that we see on the internet, were only became success stories just because of the fact that they came out of their respective situations, they came out of their respective turbulent situations, not as failures, not as victims. They took into their own hands the power to rewrite and recreate their stories as survivors. I have a burning desire to help everyone in this room feel and understand that it is okay to be vulnerable. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tobi Ibitoye, and I'm a recording and performing artist. Today, I'm going to share with you my Revamp story. But before I do, I want you to understand one thing. The story of my Revamp is no template for yours. And for how dynamic life is, it's very hard to decide or establish that any template exists at all. However, I feel that the experiences that I've had testify to the fact that it is possible to revamp. Bearing that in mind, I begin by telling you the story of my life. I was born in Nigeria. I grew up in a typical Christian home. I went to church every Sunday. I went to school every other day. I did my homework from school when I did, and I didn't when I didn't. I had a few good friends, a few not so good friends. At some point, when I started my life, I said I wanted to become a lawyer. At another point, I wanted to become a teacher. I grew up and then I decided I'd probably try diplomacy. The biggest attempt and the most successful attempt that I had was biochemistry. And even at that, I failed. Sounds horrible, I know. And I got lost at the point, on the way, and I kept thinking, well, what am I going to do? Well, now you know what I do. Eventually, I went into music, and I stayed in music for a very long while. I'm still in it, but I want to take you back to Nigeria, in the kind of home that I grew up in. I had two siblings, an older brother and an older sister. And both of them, because of tradition, demanded a lot of respect from me. Traditionally, it was established that just because these people are older than you, you must accord them respect. I remember the first time I tried to stand up to my sister. I don't remember the details of the story, but I remember what happened eventually. She ended up chasing me around the house with a huge stick. She was bent on teaching me a lesson because she felt I did not accord her the respect she required. That day, I learned one lesson. And that lesson was more important for me than for anyone that is in this room. The lesson was, regardless how essential respect was in our society, I needed to feel that I was receiving exactly the same respect. And because of that, a rebellion in me grew up. That rebellion taught me at that age what it meant to actually accord significance to this so important context of our world, respect. The lesson I learned would serve me greatly when I came to Romania. About 10 years ago, I was forced into a society that simply was not accustomed to having black people around. In 2009, in Kaufland, walking down the hallway of the store, every single person that I would walk past would turn around and be like, okay, who's this guy? And it left me asking myself at the age of almost 16, why does my skin color have so much significance? Why is it so important, the color of my skin in this medium? But it didn't stop there. It went down south. On the street, a random guy would look at me and for some random reason, want to refer to me as my nigga. And I was like, why would you want to do this? At the time, I wasn't aware. I didn't understand. I would smile and walk on by. But the worst thing was the people that I spent my free time with would often want to excuse their guilt of subtle or probably even blatant racism by asking me first if it was okay to refer to me as my nigger. I would say, okay, it's fine by me, you know. But the sheer satisfaction I saw on their face by having a real black man in front of them to call nigger made me take a step back and think something is wrong somewhere. So I decided to educate myself. I started to research. What does it mean? Why do they feel the tendency to refer to me this way? And eventually I learned that regardless how close you are to a white man, as a black man, there is no excuse for any white man to remind you so blatantly and so terribly of the horrors of your forefathers' past. But there was one more lesson to learn. My own ignorance did not make me feel any better about the brutal wickedness on which racism is created. So as much as I was responsible as well. And the moment I decided to take that responsibility, I ended up understanding that I could bring myself out of that vulnerable situation and create a new environment where understanding between myself and whoever was in front of me, between both of ourselves. Today, I live and I love the city in which I live. You know, not just because I decided to educate myself or because I was forced to give the respect I didn't receive, but because I've learned to be able to let go of the guy that doesn't know and doesn't want to know. But more so, I've learned that with patience, I can help the guy who wants to know become a better person. But before I leave the stage today, I must tell you one more story. It is a story that I feel completely expresses the purpose of my talk today. The three key words in this talk: vulnerability, creativity, and revamp. In 2016, I was forced to go back to Nigeria. But I was forced to go back to Nigeria in probably one of the most revolutionary, successful periods of my life. I had failed at biochemistry. I had fallen in love twice and harder each time. But I had started making music. At some point, I was a household name. Everybody knew Tobi from the Voice of Romania in that year that got to the final and got robbed of the final. And this made me quite popular. But then aside from the popularity, I had discovered my passion for life. I discovered what I wanted to do. I'd started making music. I started feeling gratification of myself. And right in the midst of that success story, boom, go back home. Now, the problem wasn't going back home, because if I was going back home, it would have been okay. But I was leaving a place where I felt safe. I was leaving my source of income to the hope of an allowance. I was leaving my safe place to a no man's land. And I thought I was ready. I'm like, okay, it's been 6 years, 7 years since I came here. I think I'm ready to go back to Nigeria. And then I touched down in Abuja, and then I wasn't. You think it's weird. It's supposed to be your home country. It's supposed to be where you're from. But how could I feel so happy in a place where I got 10 hours of electricity a day? Or 4 days of water supply and 3 days of none? How could I feel happy in a place where the policeman who was supposed to protect me felt aggrieved by the fact that I did not have the money to bribe him, rather than the fact that I might have committed a crime? Every day I spent in my father's house, I spent it in great devastation and huge amounts of depression, if depression can be quantified. Because I was seeing a man who had worked a good majority of his life live right on the borderlines of extreme poverty. I was living with a woman who was full of innovation and initiatives, drowned in the emptiness of lack. It was hard to take. The prime of it all was on this day when I went out in the morning, just trying to get by another day. And I almost got into a fight with a taxi driver who was supposed to give me back an equivalent of 30 cents, $0.3. Now, this guy told me, I'm not going to give you back because I don't have it. It was his first trip of the day. And he literally actually did not have the change to give back. But he told it to me so aggressively. And in my right, I felt my opinion should have been heard. So while I was exchanging words with him, I was like, look, even if you don't have this amount of money to give back, you could have at least told me in a nicer way. Maybe I would have reached an understanding with you. But in the midst of that turbulence, a realization hit me. And I think that realization saved me from getting beat up by an angry taxi man whose time I'd wasted righteously or not. I realized that I, again, was the one who was frustrated. And if at all he was, I probably just was as frustrated as he was. And the clash of frustration was what would have yielded into a devastating beating from this taxi driver. That day, I decided that I must change things, and I changed 3 things in the next 3 months. I got a job. I started making money. And it cooled down the frustration for a while. And the second thing was I started to write again. I started off structuring a book about my time in Bucharest and all the experiences that I had there. And the final thing I did was I started to hope again for a better life. But the thing is, not finding a job, working and earning money, neither hope. What helped me revamp from that terrible situation was writing. While I started writing, I realized how much I enjoyed and how privileged I was to be living in Bucharest at the time. I understood how grateful I should have been for everything that I had. But then the most important lesson that I had learned at that point in time was that regardless where I was, perspective, the way in which I saw things, was the only thing that I needed to be productive. After working for 6 months or thereabout, I called my friend and I told my friend, I want us to go back to Bucharest because I love that city. And he told me, well, let's try. Now, bear in mind, we did not have the resources at the time to actually facilitate a trip out of Nigeria to Bucharest. But our perspectives had changed, and we decided to try. I edited my work more and more, and every time I edited my work, it put my mind to work. And because my mind was constantly in function, it was constantly creating, it was editing and trying to make sure that I made that product into something better, I was in turn helping myself make a better me. The stage on which I perform today is located in Bucharest, Romania. It's in one of the biggest malls in this country. The song I wrote, the song I just performed was co-written and composed by myself. And the song I sang was about miracles. I don't know if you believe in miracles, but I used to, and then I stopped, and then I started again. Maybe I needed a miracle to change my life, or maybe a miracle could have helped me in any way. But I believe now that we are all capable of creating the miracles that we need. So, whether you feel a miracle can help you or not, you can try in your own way with the right perspective to make impossible come possible. Life is a roller coaster of challenges, and sometimes it's too difficult to grasp. However, if I've learned anything at all, I've learned to enjoy the satisfaction of succeeding and the gratification of failing. I've learned to change what I can and to accept what I can't. I've learned that I must take care of myself so that I can take care of others. I've learned that I need to have faith in myself and believe in what I can become. I've learned to never stop writing because the only truth to legacy is history. And that's it. That's my speech. But before you decide whether or not to applaud me, allow me to please create one last moment of vulnerability. I am a black man, but I'm not your nigger. I'm a man, but I'm not a hero. I hardly cry, but sometimes I do. I'm weak, and even in my weaknesses, I sometimes find strength. I love, and sometimes I hate. I believe in balance, but I also believe very firmly in God. I'm a Christian, and I love to sing on stage just as much as I love to sing in church. I'm a sinner, but I also have spells of saint in me. I'm good, I'm bad, I'm ugly. I'm made in the image of God, but there's a devil in me. I'm kind, but other times I can be evil. I make mistakes, but other times I only hit home runs. I'm sometimes depressed, other times I'm happy. I love music. I love my wife. I love my child. I love my friends. I love my parents. I love my siblings. I probably even love you. And I probably love in that order. I am straight, but I have gay friends. I'm a feminist, but there's a misogynist in me. I have lived in extreme poverty. I've lived a life in need of great validation. I've lived in an immense amount of inferiority complex. My life is indeed an embodiment of imperfection, but I now know that I can be better. Better still, for as long as I live, I know that I can and I will revamp. Thank you.